overnight, and you might be surprised at one of the cars used. DIY COVID tests. Rats. A Dunedin pharmacist reckons most people aren't doing them properly. We'll show you the right way. The KiwiSaver loophole that is leaving workers thousands of dollars out of pocket. Situations vacant. A postie to be posted at the end of the earth. Extra duties include penguin counting. And apparently elephants do fly in a jumbo-sized crate. We visit Burma at Auckland Zoo ahead of her big OE. Don't forget, you can check us out live, Sky Channel 83.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. No mai haere mai. Good afternoon. I'm Karen McCarthy. 9 young people, including an 11-year-old getaway driver, have been caught after a dairy in Auckland was ram-raided last night. The police say residents in the suburb of Sandringham spotted suspicious vehicles and called 111 shortly after 1 o'clock this morning. Andrew McRae reports.
Police say one car rammed into the shop and then 9 young people fled in a Toyota car with stolen goods. It was abandoned a short time later near the Kingsland train station. All the youths then got into another vehicle which sped south on the motorway before being stopped by road spikes in Clendon. 2 members of the group are due to appear in the youth court. The others have been referred to youth aid.
The government denies it's engaging in nanny state politics after floating the idea of banning unhealthy drinks from primary schools. Public consultation has opened on a proposal that schools offer students only water, milk or non-dairy milk alternatives. National and ACT say the move is too rigid and controlling. But the Education Minister, Chris Hipkins, who's known to enjoy a Diet Coke, says he thinks most parents will support it.
I have not had any fizzy drinks other than some kombucha for several months now, but in reality, how adults making choices about what they drink is very different to children, and I do think that there is a role for schools to play here.
Chris Hipkins says he will listen carefully to parents if there is a strong objection. The Serious Fraud Office has closed its investigation into the election campaign of Auckland Mayor Phil Goff without taking any action. It launched a formal inquiry more than 2 years ago into fundraising donations received in 2016 and 2019. Katie Todd reports.
It's unclear exactly what the investigation probed. It was launched after the Serious Fraud Office received a referral from the police. Now the SFO's acting director Paul O'Neill says he's satisfied the matter can be closed. He made no further comment. Phil Goff was unavailable today, but his campaign office issued a statement saying it was pleased the matter was resolved. It says it has always been confident about the integrity of its procedures and the rules governing donations were always followed. Mr Goff isn't seeking re-election this year.
The Foreign Affairs Minister, Nanaia Mahuta, will take part in a NATO meeting tonight focused on the response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The North Atlantic Treaty Organisation has invited foreign ministers from a number of outside countries, including New Zealand, Australia, Japan and Ukraine, to attend. Ms Mahuta will join the meeting virtually. It's due to begin at 7:30. The Cancer Society is urging opposition parties to get on board with the Maori Health Authority. An open letter penned by several non-government organisations calls for National and ACT to rethink their stance on scrapping the authority if they get into power. But the Cancer Society's medical director, Dr George Laking, says it makes sense to have Maori experts at the helm.
Try and view it simply as a way of solving a problem, which is bringing together the expertise to remedy the problem that we have. It's logical to put the commissioning power and the expertise in the hands of the people who understand it.
Under the health reforms, the Maori Health Authority will become the lead commissioner of health services for Maori. Matariki will be recognised as a public holiday for the first time this year. Legislation establishing the new holiday has just passed its third and final reading at Parliament. National and ACT opposed the bill, while Labour, the Greens and Te Pāti Maori supported it. The first Matariki public holiday will be June the 24th this year, but the day will shift each year according to when the star cluster rises. The Matariki public holiday will always fall on a Monday or Friday. It's 5:04. In sport, the fallout from the rash of red cards in Super Rugby's latest round has continued, with Blues winger Caleb Clark banned for 3 weeks. Clark was sent off for a reckless challenge while playing Moana Pacifica last week. He's one of 5 players sent off in 6 Super Rugby matches. All 5 got bans of 3 weeks or more, but the Blues have no complaints, with assistant coach Daniel Halangahu saying the penalty is fair.
The framework's pretty clear and they've applied it. One thing we're getting is that it's consistent. We're getting consistency. There has been a shift over the last few years, and that's because of the injuries that have been sustained, and we're really clear now on what's okay and what's not okay, and Caleb admittedly got it wrong.
Chelsea has a precarious hold in the Champions League after going down 3-1 to Real Madrid in their quarter-final first leg match at Stamford Bridge. In today's other quarter-final, Villarreal upset Bayern Munich 1-0, and Everton's run of 68 years in the English top flight is in danger after they slumped to a 3-2 defeat to fellow strugglers Burnley. The coach of the New Zealand women's hockey team, Graham Shaw, has quit after 3 years in the role and is returning home to Ireland. And auctioneer Sotheby's expects the shirt worn by Diego Maradona when he scored his infamous Hand of God goal against England at the 1986 Football World Cup to sell for at least $7.5 million. The shirt is being sold by former England player Steve Hodge, who swapped shirts with Maradona after the match, which Argentina won 2-1. That's the news.
An insight into disinformation.
It's sophisticated, strategic and tactical. These are offline and online communities putting out misinformation and disinformation that is hugely compelling.
A glimpse of life in public service.
It's just relentless. I'm amazed that they've lasted so long. They must be just so worn out.
And a win in court for Ed Sheeran over claims of plagiarism.
Let us shape your morning. Morning reports weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
Lisa Owen and Checkpoint are next after the short forecast from Met Service to midnight on Friday. For Northland, Auckland, Coromandel and Bay of Plenty, fine, apart from isolated showers in Northland. Waikato to Kapiti, including the central high country, fine today, cloud and a few showers spreading north tomorrow. Gisborne to Wairarapa, also Wellington, a few showers, clearing this evening or overnight, fine tomorrow, but the chance of a shower in Wellington and Wairarapa. Bulla and Westland, fine today, a few showers developing overnight, clearing to fine in Westland tomorrow afternoon. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, mainly fine, a few showers developing about North Canterbury and the Kaikoura district tomorrow evening. For Otago, Southland and Fiordland, occasional showers about the coast, fine inland and in northern Fiordland, showers becoming widespread for a time in the morning, and the Chatham Islands, occasional showers clearing for a time tomorrow morning. It's 5:07.
Nā mihi Karen, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. An 11-year-old driver is one of 9 young people picked up by police following a ram raid on an Auckland superette overnight. Sandringham residents raised the alarm after spotting 3 cars they thought were up to no good at 1 o'clock this morning. One of the cars had been used in a ram raid and an alleged burglary was underway by the time police arrived. The group did a high-speed runner but was tracked by the police helicopter and eventually caught. Our reporter Nick Trowbridge is at the superette and joins us now. Nick, what more do we know about what happened?
Hi Lisa, well I'm standing in the superette as you say. I'm in between the chips and the drink. What happened? Good question. Well, it was about 1:30, 2 a.m. The Toyota Aqua that you mentioned, it ram raided the front of the dairy about 2 or 3 times. For those who are listening rather than watching, the front of the dairy is now completely boarded up, if you can hear that. The front windows and front doors completely smashed. As for what was taken, well, I've just been speaking to the dairy owner. He didn't want to appear on camera, but they did take about $300 worth of cigarettes. They also took his till, but he had emptied it. There was nothing in it, unfortunately, for those ram raiders, shall we say. Now, the action, it did start here, but it continued after here. They went right down Sandringham Road, which is just behind me if Nick pans around. All the way down Sandringham Road, they got to about Kingsland train station. From there, this was the 9 of them, including that 11-year-old. They bailed on that first car, that Toyota Aqua. They jumped in a second car, and then they headed out on the southern motorway. By this stage, the Eagle helicopter was involved. They were trailed all the way down to Manurewa in South Auckland, I believe it was. There they were spiked. The police put road spikes out, and from there they were apprehended in Clendon, Lisa. So it all started right here where I'm standing at the moment, Sandringham Superette, about 1:30, 2 a.m. in the morning. It ended about 25 minutes, half an hour away, all the way down in Clendon.
And Nick, you've mentioned this car that was used, a Toyota Aqua. This is a hybrid, right? So what are police saying about that vehicle and generally?
Yeah, good question. It is a hybrid. There's actually one, if Nick just pans over my right shoulder, there's actually one sitting just here. For people who don't know the Toyota Aqua, it sort of looks like a Toyota Corolla, I guess you would say, about the same size, except it's a hybrid version. Now, police have said that this is one of the most stolen cars in Auckland at the moment. So their advice, park it off the road if you can. Keep it out of sight. Another cheap option is getting a steering wheel lock as well. As I say, one of the most stolen cars in Auckland. So if you've got one of these little puppies, make sure you lock it up and keep it out of sight.
And Nick, I'm just looking at that vehicle, right? We're talking about 9 people. It ain't huge.
Yeah. Nine people in one of these things. I'm coming right up to it now for those who aren't watching. It is absolutely tiny. I mean, you would struggle to fit in a family of 5 in there, to be honest, let alone 9 people. Who knows where they were sitting, maybe in the boot, all on top of each other, I would suggest. But this is the vehicle they were in, indeed.
Okay. Now, what do we know about what's happening with these young people, the 9 of them? We know one of them obviously is 11 years old. So what happens now?
Yeah, well, I suppose speaking to the age of these 9 individuals, Lisa, 7 of them are going to be, actually, let me just check my notes here. I want to make sure I get this right. 2 of them, rather, will be going through the youth court. Again, speaking to their age, 7 of them have been referred onto youth aid. So not only a fairly full-on crime, an exceptionally full-on crime for people of this age who are now being referred to youth services, Lisa.
Thanks, Nick. That is Nick Trubridge in Sandringham there, speaking about this alleged ram raid involving an 11-year-old driver, the police say. 9 in total who made their getaway during a high-speed chase, we are told. It is 11 minutes past 5. Kia mau tonu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Some rest homes are no longer requiring people to show vaccine passports before visiting loved ones. Instead, rat tests are among measures aimed at keeping COVID-19 away from vulnerable older people. Reporter Jimmy Ellingham has more.
Vaccine mandates remain in place for aged care workers, and they must have negative rat tests before coming to work. But while some rest homes are choosing to still cite vaccine passes from visitors, others are not, following the easing of rules this week. Anna Blackwell, who owns the Cook Street Nursing Care Centre in Palmerston North, says as rules change, it's time to start thinking about operating when managing COVID in the community.
We can't lock families out and we can't live in fear, but we can't also open the doors and go, there's nothing to worry about, because clearly we're in a demographic that a big Omicron outbreak isn't what we want for staff or residents. So yeah, it feels like we're at a real balancing act and a turning point, and it's just knowing when it's safe to make that turn.
The Cook Street Care Centre doesn't require vaccine passes anymore, but visitors must have a negative rat test. Anna Blackwell says throughout the pandemic it's made exceptions for unvaccinated people to visit by using extra PPE or arranging outdoor visits.
What's best for residents is that they have family contact. We have to always be balancing that, wanting to get families in here so that residents can have that value in their lives, as opposed to making sure we're not putting residents and my staff at risk from unnecessary COVID transmission.
Auckland University epidemiologist Professor Rod Jackson says rat tests aren't reliable enough to be a definitive diagnostic device.
I've just been told about some old age care homes where they're now allowing people in who aren't vaccinated, and so you come in without a vaccination pass, and all you need to do is to have a negative rat. I just don't think that's sufficient for that extremely high risk setting.
A Bupa spokeswoman says its rest homes aren't requiring vaccine passes. But she says rat tests are only one part of a range of measures to keep residents safe. They're also limiting visitors to 2 at a time in a resident's room and taking extra hygiene precautions. She says Bupa is following legal requirements that say aged care homes can't deny people, other than workers, entry on the basis of their vaccination status. A Ryman Healthcare spokesman says its rest homes are still requiring vaccine passes for routine visits because they are essential to help protect residents. Special measures are taken for unvaccinated visitors. They can see residents in special rooms that are clean between visits. New Zealand Aged Care Association Chief Executive Simon Wallace says its advice for rest homes is to keep citing vaccine passes for visitors as they provide an extra level of assurance.
That's because of the vulnerability of the people that we're looking after. Our residents are obviously have a number of health conditions and they're most at risk from the virus.
It's an approach Roy Reid of Grey Power endorses.
It's very important that they protect their residents from the virus as much as they can. They've done a damn good job up until now in stopping the virus spreading into rest homes. So they've got to continue to manage it.
Roy Reid says many rest home residents have been doing it tough for the past 2 years because of visitor restrictions.
Tertiary students are more than twice as likely as the rest of us to be living in damp and mouldy homes. That's the finding of a survey of 522 students by researchers at the Otago University. And as Rosie Gordon and cameraman Samuel Rillstone found out, students' physical and mental health is suffering as a result.
Living in mouldy, cold and damp flats is part and parcel of university life in Wellington, according to students we spoke to.
At one point we realised that almost all of our rooms had patches of mould growing over the ceiling, and in the middle of winter it got as bad as having to clean the mould off the ceiling every couple of weeks.
All the corners of the rooms were just extremely mouldy. We had black mould in a couple of the bedrooms, and then the toilets were the same, just lots of mould everywhere.
These two are far from being the only ones. Dr Kimberly O'Sullivan is a senior research fellow from Otago University's He Kāinga Ora Housing Health Research Programme. They surveyed 522 students and the results surprised her.
So we found that twice as many students are living in damp and mouldy homes as the general population in New Zealand, and we didn't realise it would be that high.
Dr O'Sullivan says 35% had mould larger than an A4 sheet of paper growing in their houses at least some of the time. The results were worse for Maori students and those with disabilities or long-term health concerns.
We know that Māori have greater rates of deprivation, so I guess perhaps not a surprise, but we were surprised at the extent to which both Māori and disabled student groups were particularly affected.
Dr O'Sullivan says energy poverty is a large driver of mouldy, cold student housing.
So 3/4 of students told us that they were cutting back on heating to save on costs. So, it's a significant struggle for students to be able to afford to have heating at home.
A finding that's not surprising to the Victoria University Students Association Engagement Vice President, Catherine Blow.
I guess to get rid of mould you need to keep your house dry, which uses a dehumidifier, and dehumidifiers are A, obviously expensive to buy, and B, really expensive to run.
The survey also found some students were cutting back on necessities to afford heating, a reality for Catherine Blow.
From personal experience, I'll buy less groceries to pay for more power. So I guess that just means eating less.
Dr O'Sullivan's found energy poverty hampers students' physical and mental health too. Students we spoke to have experienced that firsthand.
Pretty depressing. I feel like just your house looking like that and it kind of being out of your hands can kind of have a mental impact.
The mould on the curtains, it made me quite wheezy at night, and I actually struggled to sleep the first couple of weeks until I actually got used to it and I started taking it antihistamines before bed and stuff.
One of my mates actually got quite sick from it, just cold for a month.
Researchers want more targeted support for students. The Energy Minister, Megan Woods, says the government's waiting to hear back from an expert panel on energy hardship and that the Healthy Home Standards are helping to lift rental standards. But the Property Investors Federation head Sheeran says even when the standards are met, they won't solve the problem.
Landlords are doing as much as they can and trying to bring their houses up to the Healthy Home Standard. It will make a difference, but I don't know if it'll be a huge, significant difference.
Sharon Culwick says that's because the main way of heating a house is turning on the heating, something many students are struggling to afford.
It is 18 minutes past 5. Is it time to ban unhealthy drinks from schools? The government wants feedback on a plan to outlaw fizz and all other sugary drinks from primary schools, meaning water, milk and non-dairy alternatives will be the only things kids can swig back on site. It says dental decay is now the most common disease reported in our children, and a quarter of their sugar intake is from sweetened beverages. And you can add to that growing obesity rates. Beach Haven Primary has already made the switch, and Principal Stephanie Thompson joins us now. Kia ora, Stephanie.
Oh, kia ora, Lisa. How are you tonight?
I'm well, thank you. Do you reckon this is a good idea to do it across the board at all primary schools?
Oh, that's a really good question around a complete ban and legislating it. I think what will be really interesting is if people could go in and put their feedback into the ministry. That would be a really good start, and then we'll have a clear steer on that. My experience would be that most parents would be supportive of something like this happening, and it's when it's in place, it's not really a big deal.
So how does it work at your school, and when did you bring it in?
Well, good question about when we bring it in. So we've had the water only policy at our school for quite some time. We're probably looking at 8 to 10 years, and that came about from when we used to have a canteen and one of those dispensing machines that had drinks in it that were probably too sugar filled, and with consultation with our community, we got rid of those and then introduced water only. So when you do something like this, it's really important to speak with your community, do it with your community.
Because the thing is, I mean, is it the jobs of schools to be policing what's in the drink bottle or the lunchbox, or is that something parents should do? Oh, I think we've lost Stephanie. We will try and get her back, the principal of Beach Haven Primary School there. And the government are asking for feedback on whether to ban fizzy drinks and sugary drinks from primary schools. We will have a chat to the principal shortly, but I'm really interested in what your thoughts are on this one. Homai o whakaaro, send your feedback to 2101 on the text. And now we've got Stephanie Thompson back on the line. So are you there, Stephanie?
Oh, yeah, sorry about that. I'm not sure what happened there.
No problem at all. Now, I was just asking you, I mean, is it the job of schools to be checking drink bottles and lunchboxes and backpacks, or is this something for parents to decide on their own?
Well, like I said before, I think if you have, if you do this in consultation with your community, then it just isn't an issue. So, at our school, students know that it's water only, so they don't tend to bring things in that they shouldn't. And if they did, that becomes a really good learning opportunity to have a talk about just how much sugar's sitting in. So if they brought a 600ml bottle of fizzy in, there's 16 teaspoons of sugar in there, and it's a really good opportunity in your health program to have a conversation about why water is better for their brain and better for them at school. And it just, once it's in place, it just isn't an issue because everybody's on board.
Do you take away contraband, if I can call it that?
Well, I guess if someone did bring one of those bottles in, we would probably take it away and give it back to them at the end of the day, because, again, what happens after school isn't really in my domain, but we can help with what's happening within our school.
Yeah, isn't that the issue, Stephanie? That they're at school for a certain number of hours and they can equally just pop past the dairy, get a cheap cola and scull it back before school and go straight from school to the dairy when the bell rings at the end of the day.
Indeed, and I guess what we can do at school is I think, when you look at the fact that schools are not really the panacea for all the issues that plague society, but we can play a role in this particular issue alongside our community around helping students understand why water is a better choice, or the low-fat milk, and how their bodies operate and what makes their brain a healthy brain, and that water hydrates you and that's good for you and helps you become more alert and more energetic. We can do all those things at school, and of course after school or before school, that's not our domain, and that's a parent's choice. But within school, we can certainly help educate our students and our community about what helps them be the best they can be when they are at school.
Behaviour changes, did you notice any?
Well, I guess it's a tool. It's one tool in a whole big kite of tools, and I guess because we've had it in place for so long, it just is what it is. But I can imagine that if we didn't have that and everybody was sculling back the the cans of fizzy, as you sort of nicely put, then we would see I would think that we would see a decline, because the science is quite clear that sugar is not good for kids. So anything we can do to help make the job of the teacher better and the learning of the students better, I think, we have this obligation to do that.
Very quickly before you go, do the staff model the same behaviour, or are they allowed to drink fizz on campus?
No, they're really good. In fact, we've got water coolers for staff, so there's plenty of good water on tap for everybody, which is great.
Thank you for your time, Stephanie. That is Stephanie Thompson, who's the principal of Beach Haven Primary School. They already have, as she said, a just water policy on the school grounds. Love to know what you reckon. Nō reira, anei na kaupapa mō te hōtaka nei. Should primary schools, should there be blanket legislation that says only water, milk or non-dairy equivalents of milk for kids to drink on school grounds? Text me, Pātui Mai, 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. The Agriculture Minister says more support is on its way for drought-hit southern farmers. Damien O'Connor has visited Southland today, where he spoke to farmers and community leaders and revealed the government will be doing more to get workers into the freezing works to clear the backlog of stock on the farm. Our reporter Timothy Brown is in Southland and has more.
The parched soil of Southland received several millimetres of rain yesterday, and Agriculture Minister Damien O'Connor says more good news is in the forecast.
We will be providing support in a whole lot of ways. There's been no request for any monetary support. They don't expect that. What they want is some understanding, and then whether some coordination can occur, whether it be through fee budgeting or be it through getting a few more workers into the freezing works, that's where we'll play our part.
Are there more levers you can pull in terms of getting workers into the freezing works?
Yeah, look, there'll be announcements on that in the next few days.
And with more rain also expected to fall in the next month and soil temperatures still remaining high, Southland farmers have some reason to hope the worst is behind them. The government has already offered $100,000 in support with the declaration of a medium-scale adverse event. Damien O'Connor also met with the region's mayors today to get a sense of what's confronting Southland.
They appreciate that money for the Rural Support Trust and for the coordination. This is not money that goes directly to farmers. I mean, the costs that they're incurring are, hundreds of thousands of dollars, often on one property.
The Minister, along with Associate Agriculture Minister Meka Whaitiri, visited John Pemberton's dairy farm on Island Edendale Road. Mr Pemberton says they won't be able to buy their way out of the drought, but the government's recognition is appreciated.
Concern is once people need that support, they're in a position that it's going to be quite a hard way to come back from. It's great to see the support for that come down, but it's not just a handout to the rural sector, it's going to advisors and resources for people that are really struggling in this position.
Mr Pemberton has kept a smile on his face and says in some ways he's one of the luckier ones, but many are struggling. He says the government needs to recognise the next 6 months will be tough for many in the south.
They need some room to think. The head's currently full of how the heck they're going to get to the end of the season, let alone get in through the spring. So we've always got to keep moving forward with that red tape, but at the same time we've got to make sure it's at a rate that the uptake is sustainable, so we don't overload the system.
Southland Rural Support Trust Coordinator Lindsay Wright says the mental health of the region's farmers is a concern.
Farmers are just not good at coming forward and asking for help, and so that's always our concern, is to let them know that there is somebody there that they can talk to when it does get too hard for them. And it's the sort of stuff you lie awake at night at 3 o'clock in the morning thinking about it over and over and again, and it becomes a huge problem in your own mind. But then if you don't ask for help, nobody knows that you need it.
In Gore, there's no doubt among the town's residents that the government should be offering the region's farmers more support.
Yeah, probably they could be. Just giving them a bit of a hand in these tough times. The baleage and everything, as I understand, has gone up, about doubled to what it was, and so they know they do need help.
Of course something has to be done, and it's a government initiative that needs to be looked at. I mean, where does it start? The farmers are working hard, they can't make it rain, even though I've seen some out there doing a rain dance.
So, with more government support ostensibly on its way, the only question remaining is whether it'll be enough to help Southland's farmers through a drought many are labelling the toughest ever.
It's the end of an era. Auckland Zoo saying goodbye to their last beloved elephant in a few weeks. Anjali has already crossed the ditch to her new home at Taronga Western Plains Zoo, and Burma will be leaving at the end of the month to a new life at Australia Zoo. Reporter Louise Tanuth and camera operator Marika Habazi paid Burma one last visit.
For the last 32 years, Auckland Zoo has been home for Burma, with Anjali joining her in 2015. They've been together ever since. Last month, Anjali made the journey to Taronga Zoo with hopes to finally breed after many setbacks here.
We were always supposed to receive a second animal from Sri Lanka that never arrived. We've tried over a number of years to get Anjali pregnant through artificial insemination, so she could have a calf here and we could build up the herd that way. That unfortunately, for various reasons, again, didn't eventuate.
Zoo Director Kevin Bewley says it wasn't an easy decision and staff that work so closely with the elephants are struggling.
In many ways, what they will be experiencing is grief. Animals that they work with every day for years and years and years, collective experience of 50, 60 years of working with these animals, and that's no longer going to be part of their life.
He says there are other opportunities for those staff at the zoo. It's emotional news for these zoo goers.
I'm sad. I'm really sorry to see them go. I've even done a circuit, but then I've walked all the way back even though I'm tired just to have another look, because what is it, another week or 2 weeks and she's gone.
They are my favourite animals, but just one left now.
It'll be sad though, because like the kids and it's a really family oriented house. Like people love coming to see the elephants and all the other animals, but
Although the pair have spent 6 years together, Burma's enjoying the extra love that comes with being the only one left.
I think the princess in her loves all the extra attention. She's the sole focus of attention for the team, who have done an incredible job in settling her after Anjali's move.
The pool playtime and treats are testament to that.
Once she's in the crate on the night of her move, the crate gets lifted out of the habitat here onto the back of a truck. The truck goes down to Auckland Airport, where she'll get loaded onto a commercial freighter, cargo plane, for the flight across to Brisbane.
There she'll hop on a truck to Australia Zoo, where she'll live out her twilight years with 4 other elephants. Kevin Bewley says these elephants will be the zoo's last after almost a century.
In order to bring them back in would require a level of commitment and investment, and I'm going to pick a number out of the air here, over $100 million to do it on a full scale, starting from scratch again. So I think it's a one-way decision.
Today was Anjali's first day out of quarantine, starting her new life. All going well, Burma will board her flight at the end of this month. That means if you want to say goodbye, now is the time to visit. Auckland Zoo says it will continue to get updates about the elephants from across the Tasman.
Oh, bye-bye Burma. And if you were listening to that on radio, do go online. You'll see the video filmed by Marika of Burma there. It's worth checking out. E te iwi e Hariaki nei e checkpoint, Aotearoa farmers are facing increased costs due to sanctions against Russia. The KiwiSaver loophole that could see thousands of dollars coming out of your back pocket. And low and slow, we show you the right technique for probing your schnoz for the DIY COVID test. You won't want to miss that one. Homai or whakaaro, we'd love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program today. Text us 2101, you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It's time for the headlines now. Ko Karen Arnold tēnei.
Thanks, Lisa. No further action is being taken after a 2-year investigation into the election campaign of outgoing Auckland Mayor Phil Goff. The Serious Fraud Office launched a formal inquiry into fundraising donations received in 2016 and 2019 after a referral from the police. The SFO's acting director, Paul O'Neill, will only say he is satisfied the matter can be closed. Mr Goff's campaign office says the rules governing donations were always followed. Road spikes brought an 11-year-old getaway driver with 8 passengers to a halt after a ram raid at an Auckland dairy. The shop in Sandringham was targeted early this morning and the culprits fled with stolen goods. They switched cars in Kingsland and took off down the motorway before police stopped them at Clendon. 2 are due to appear in the youth court and the others have been referred to youth aid. Matariki will be recognised as a public holiday for the first time this year. Legislation establishing the new holiday has just passed its third and final reading at Parliament. National and ACT opposed the bill, while Labour, the Greens and Te Pāti Maori supported it. The Chief Executive of the Mid-Central DHB, Catherine Cook, is stepping down after being in the role for 7 years. Her resignation is the 5th in the health sector this week, including the resignation of the Director-General of Health, Ashley Bloomfield, and the Director of Public Health, Dr Caroline McElnay. The government denies it's engaging in nanny state politics after floating the idea of banning unhealthy drinks from primary schools. Public consultation is opened on a proposal that schools offer students only water, milk or non-dairy milk alternatives. National and ACT say the move is too rigid and controlling, but the Education Minister, Chris Hipkins, believes most parents will support it. They're the headlines. We'll have more news at 6.
Nā mihi mo te rā. No mai hoki mai, this is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei, ko taku hoa inai nei, ko Nona Peltier, who is here to talk business. Nona, let's have a chat about the Tiwai aluminium smelter. What's going on there?
Yeah, so the owner put out a statement this morning about, a preliminary plan on how they plan to clean up the toxic waste that the smelter's been producing really for, decades. The company has earlier signaled that it would close in 2024, where it has a pretty sweet power supply deal with Meridian until then. But it's made it very clear that it's intending to keep the smelter open past 2024. It says it's in talks with the community and industry leaders and so on. Well, Meridian says they haven't heard from them, so who knows. But for sure, the deal that they have right now for supply, it's considered a pretty sweet deal. The Electricity Authority has, in the past, estimated at a cost of about $500 million to consumers, or about $200 a year per household. Meridian's made it clear that they're not going to be entertaining such a sweet deal in the future. So it remains to be seen whether or not it does remain open. Certainly the price of aluminium, as we talked about yesterday, is through the roof, near record highs, rose 8.4% last month over the month earlier. So it's all looking up for the price. Whether or not that continues in the Southland, it remains to be seen.
Apparently, we trust the business sector, Nona.
Yes. Now, there's a survey that's been done. It's been underway for about 19 years, and now suddenly the business as a institution, so as a sector, that's all business, has topped a recent survey about who we trust the most. It's just in the trust zone, mind you, but nevertheless, one of the reasons why that's happened is because of COVID. A lot of people have been able to ask their employer for flexible hours, and with illness and so forth, people feel like they can trust the business as employers and so on. Consumers are also much more interested in dealing with businesses that they know and trust, and that compares with, say, the government, which was in a neutral position, and the media, sadly to say.
I was going to ask you, Nona, are we up there with car salespeople? Where are we?
We're down the bottom there, Lisa. Okay. I have to tell you, we average well below the global average, as a matter of fact. The global average for media trust is still not trustworthy at 50%. We're at 41%. What's really, I thought, quite interesting was that, more than 70% of New Zealanders don't trust anything they see on social media. So it's not just us.
Nona, I trust you to tell us what's going on the market.
Well, thank you. And do you want to hear what's happened today then?
I do.
All right, well, the top 50 index, it closed down 3 points to 12,076. And the New Zealand dollar, steady at 68.9 US cents, 92.9 Australian and 52.7 British pence.
Thank you, Nona. Ka kite, Nona Peltier there with Business News. Let's get to some of your feedback now, because a lot of you are getting in touch about fizzy drinks. Government's asking for feedback on whether fizzy, sugary drinks should be banned from primary schools to start off with. Now, Jenny says many schools have water, milk or juice-only rules already. Juice should be allowed, but not fizzy drinks. Good for kids and for many family budgets. Our kids' school had that, and it was good. Another person says definitely ban sugar drinks, a totally unnecessary addictive substance that will become as controversial as cigarette promotion was. Just awful what the impact on health is. Another listener says, why just primary? Include secondary schools too. I think the government's made it quite clear that it's looking at primary to start off with, and then it will make further decisions about other schools later. A KiwiSaver loophole means thousands of dollars are being shaved off some people's take-home pay, and it's simply unfair, according to one advocacy group. Right now, employers can include what's called a total remuneration clause in an employment agreement, and what that means is they can legally deduct their KiwiSaver contributions from the workers' pay, instead of them being an added extra. Here to explain the ins and outs is Consumer New Zealand boss John Duffy. Kia ora, John.
Kia ora.
So how common do you reckon these total remuneration clauses are in contracts?
Well, it's actually really hard to tell, because obviously, for good reason, your employment agreement is confidential between you and your employer. So it is quite difficult to tell. Back in 2015, the Employers and Manufacturers Association found that 28% of senior managers and 20% of other staff were affected by total remuneration clauses, but we don't have any more up-to-date information than that.
And so what does it mean in reality when it comes to your take-home pay?
Well, basically it means that headline figure that you think is your salary, the one that you tell your partner that you're earning, is actually 3% less, because your employer is siphoning out the contribution that they're meant to be making to your KiwiSaver out of your total rem.
It's not illegal though, is it, what they're doing?
No, it has been in the past.
But right now it's not, is it, John?
Right now it's not, no. So in 2008, a clause in the KiwiSaver Act was repealed by the then national government, which made it perfectly legal for employers and employees to agree to these clauses. And I think that's the crucial point. What, in our view, lots of employees won't actually realise what total remuneration means when they read it in their employment agreement, and they won't necessarily know, possibly until their first pay packet comes through, that actually the employer is subtracting 3% from their wages and putting it in as their KiwiSaver contribution. Right,
so you reckon it's been basically slid past the goalie?
For some, I reckon it would be, yes.
But then you say, about 28% of senior managers possibly have this clause in their contracts. Would you not expect senior managers to know about this and look for it?
Yeah, potentially. And look, I would hope that it is part of a negotiation, and that employers are acting in good faith and being upfront about these clauses. And for some cases, that might be what's happened. In other cases, we're a bit concerned that, yeah, as you say, they're being slipped past the goal, and people won't understand exactly what this means.
So you describe it as a loophole right now. What do you reckon should happen with that loophole?
Well, we understand that NB is looking at it, and we think actually we should go back to the pre-2008 position where the loophole was closed, and employers need to pay you your base salary that you agree, and then add the 3% on top of that.
But John, when you say they're looking at it, they've been looking at it for, ad infinitum, haven't they?
Well, you could probably say that about a lot of things. With MB at the moment, there's a lot of policy going through MB, and it's not necessarily quick. So it'd be great if they moved quicker on it, but that's where it is at the moment.
Okay, given we're in the waiting room on this, what's your advice to workers?
Check your contract and make sure you understand what's going on. If you see the words total remuneration in a clause, actually ask your employer, what does this mean? Does this mean you're subtracting my KiwiSaver from my total rem, or do you pay KiwiSaver on top? If they fudge their answer to you, they might not be acting in good faith, and they could breach the Employment Relations Act.
Thank you for joining us, John. That is John Duffy, Consumer New Zealand boss there, telling you to check out what the deal is with your contract and KiwiSaver. Farmers will face increased costs for fertilisers caused by the import bans and tariff hikes imposed on Russia because of its invasion of Ukraine. And those higher costs will eventually be passed on to the consumer. In response to the war, the government has announced a 35% tariff on all imports from Russia. Andrew McRae reports.
Last year, New Zealand imported nearly $18 million worth of fertiliser from Russia, one of the world's major suppliers. While this is only about 15% of fertiliser imports last year, which totalled just over $1 billion, the loss of Russian fertiliser on the world market will be keenly felt. Professor of Agricultural Economics at Lincoln University, Alan Rennick, says it will have a major knock-on impact on food prices generally.
We're in competition for the fertiliser that is available, and clearly it will go to where the highest price is paid. So if there's a disturbance in the market such as that, then our prices will rise.
He says fertiliser prices were rising even before Russia invaded Ukraine.
Fertiliser requires a lot of natural gas in its production, and those prices have been rising. So there's already major pressure on fertiliser prices.
Fertiliser Association Chief Executive Vera Power says the international market is being squeezed.
At the same time, a lot of other countries are looking to secure their own supplies, so they're exporting less. And this comes on top of an already strained shipping challenges around the world.
She says the two major fertiliser companies, Balance Agri-Nutrients and Ravensdown, haven't been importing product from Russia recently. Professor Rennick says the two co-ops, which are responsible for about 95% of the imports, will continue to source supplies elsewhere.
Maybe not a case that we can't get the fertiliser, but the fact is we're going to have to pay top dollar to get that fertiliser, and that's where the pressure is going to come onto our costs of production, particularly in our dairy sector, where we obviously use a lot for grass to increase our dairy production.
2.7 million tonnes of fertiliser was imported into New Zealand last year. Colin Hurst from Federated Farmers says farmers can use less fertiliser for a while, but there's a limit.
So it's like sort of money in the bank. So it's like your fertility, you try to maintain it, but we can normally handle a year or two of not putting as much on or not at all. So it's that whole price versus the value thing that farmers will always try and work out and see how it all might pan out. So potentially they will use a whole lot less until the prices come back to a more reasonable figure, I suppose.
He says this applies to phosphate and potassium, but not nitrogen. Alan Rennick from Lincoln University says when prices rise, farmers need to think very carefully about how they use fertiliser and to think about other options.
Maybe use legumes or nitrogen-fixing plants in our systems. We can move to perhaps more use of organic fertilisers. But there's a range of things we can do to apply to make sure we're getting the maximum of fertiliser that we are using. And this might be about timing, it might be reducing a little bit, but it has a major impact on the system, that's for sure.
Vera Power from the Fertilizer Association says there's no risk of this country running out of fertiliser.
Rats, rapid antigens, not the ones with tails. There's a call for more pharmacy-supervised rats following concerns about their DIY accuracy. RNZ is aware of people testing negative more than once using rats, only to be confirmed to be positive later, sometimes with a PCR test. Last night, Dunedin pharmacist Peter Barron contacted us to say he's got the answer. He told me most people just aren't doing them correctly.
I've done, several hundred of them now. And I had a lady yesterday who wasn't very nice to me because she wanted to do it herself, and I said, well, no, I really need to do it for you. And I eventually relented because I said most people don't do it properly, and she immediately demonstrated precisely not the way to do it. So that's why I know Rod Jackson's been recommending that probably pharmacists should do these tests and they should be supervised because most people are not doing them correctly.
Peter, what do you reckon the number one thing is that people get wrong?
Well, the number one thing is that most people are sort of sitting there, they're sitting or standing, and people think that their nose goes up. So they're just pushing it up the nose. And what they're basically doing is they're getting that dry, hard skin on the top of the nose, where in actual fact, we need to get the swab as deep as we can and down the base of the nose. Does that make sense to you?
It does, but I reckon we'll go through that slowly. On my desk here in the studio, I've got one of these rat kits, right? So I'm just taking out the little plastic thing that you drop the liquid into once you're done. And I've put my little bottle of liquid in its little stand. And I've got this thing that I like to call the big swizzle stick. So the cotton bud, right? I've got it out of its wrapper. Now what, Peter? Talk me through what I should be doing.
Now, just make sure you do use the cotton bud end, not the sharp end, because I have seen people do it the other way around.
That could be very painful. Yes, I am an observing cotton end. Yep, got that ready.
So what I really want you to do is I want you to imagine that you're putting some drops into your nose. If you're sitting down, I'd like you to look up to the ceiling. Yeah. And what I want you to do is I want you to gently rotate that swab in along the bottom of your nose. So imagine you're just sliding it along the base of your nose. And once you're in as far as you're comfortable, I'd like to get it in 1 or 2 centimetres as far as you're comfortable. And then I'd like you to think that the front end of the swab is actually touching the top of your nostril with the swab on the bottom of your nostril towards the back.
Lordy, that's a long way in, Peter.
Well, as long as you're comfortable. And then rotate it 4 or 5 times. I generally count it down. I'll generally go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1... And then I'll take it out and I do the same on the other nostril.
Is it right that my eyes are watering and my nose, I feel like I want to sneeze?
Some people's eyes do water and some people do sneeze. Some people laugh. Some people just find it quite usual. The amazing thing I find is how many people have had broken noses and it's very difficult to get into their nose.
Right, so should you be hitting the back of your schnoz?
Well, as far as the deeper you can get, the better. But I mean, it certainly needs to be 1 or 2 centimetres. So looking at those swab you've got, if it's a short one, you're probably wanting to get at least a third of the way in on that swab.
Okay, so I've got my giant cotton bud now. I've done it. I counted it down. I'm going to plop the end into the liquid. Yep.
Correct. Now, depending upon which one you've got, some of them recommend leaving it in there for a few minutes. But what you certainly need to do is you certainly need to squeeze that quite a few times. They say 10 to 12 times, just to make sure that you get out all the virus sample out into the liquid. Then once you've done that, pull the swab out and just squeeze it again. Squeeze as much liquid out of the swab as you can, and then you can dispose of the swab. They can just go into general rubbish. You're not going to get anything from the testing solution.
Okay.
And then,
so the reason I'm squeezing it, Peter, is because that pushes the liquid up over the cotton bud where the sample is, correct?
Yes. You're wanting to squeeze. You're wanting to get the sample of the virus that's as far as there. You're wanting to get the sample out.
So I've got about 9 seconds to go. How many of these would you be doing in a day, Peter?
Oh, I can sometimes, if I've got to go over to the High Court, with a heavy jury trial, I can sometimes do 30 in the space of an hour. They're tending to drop off a little bit now that some of the restrictions are lifting, but I've done 30, 40, 50 in a day at times. Other days we don't do many. We're doing mostly now for international travel, a few still for domestic travel, but mostly for international travel.
Right, I've got my little sample. I've capped it while we've been talking, and then I'm supposed to put 4 drops into the...
Well, so just squeeze 4 drops and hold that up and squeeze 4 drops into the well.
Yep, done it.
And then you should start to see in a few seconds, or it might be a minute or so, you'll see the solution run up the test. It's important you leave that test sitting flat on a desk.
Yep, done that.
And you should start to see it's probably pinkish now.
Yep, it is.
Yeah, and what we'll see is you've got 2 lines there. You've got a test line and a control line. In order for the test to be valid, the C line, which is the far away one, has to show. It'll show a pink strip. It'll go clear eventually, the background, and that proves that the test is valid. And if you're positive, you'll get a second one by the T. Now, in my experience, I haven't had too many positives because in pharmacy we're generally testing people who are asymptomatic. So we're not expecting to get positives, but we do occasionally get them. And in my experience, what you'll find is that the test line comes up very quickly. I was out doing a home visit for somebody who we suspected was COVID positive, and we were in full PPE and did the test, and the test line came up, positive line came up straight away, virtually within 30 seconds of me putting the solution into the test strip.
Right, so I'm leaving this for 15 minutes. I've had my eye on the clock, so just keep your fingers crossed that I'm all good here, and we'll let our listeners know what happens, obviously. But do you think it's helpful to have pharmacists doing more of these tests for accuracy purposes?
I think at the end of the day, if we're going to get accuracy, I mean, as Professor Jackson said, just quoted this morning, I think, is saying that he thinks that people self-testing are missing probably 50% of the positive cases. The RATS test are never going to be as sensitive as the PCR test, but I agree with him. We could probably get up to about an 80% sensitivity. The other key issue is that if you've got symptoms, then suspect that it is. Even if the test comes up negative, suspect that it is. But I agree with him. I think probably most people are not sampling themselves properly. And I just re-emphasise the fact that you need to be getting into the base of the nose, not the top of the nose, to get that sample.
Right, and if you had COVID, it'd be in there, in and around your nose.
Oh, that's where it'll be. Now, it's not to say that, I mean, some people will test negative, will be positive, but will test negative with the rapid antigen test, but hopefully not too many. But I think the big problem at the moment is technique, and it's also probably people not going far enough into the nose. All the people that I've observed who wanted to do their own have always done it incorrectly, and they're just simply they're not getting the right part of the nose, they're not getting in far enough, and most of them aren't leaving the swab in for long enough.
And that was pharmacist Peter Barron there talking me through that RAT test. If you're interested, it was negative, which is why I'm here. Low and slow, he says. I feel like I lost a few brain cells there. All Black great Dan Carter has put his rugby boots back on in the name of charity. The former First Five is aiming for 1,598 goal kicks in the next 24 hours. It's for his DC10 fund, a dedicated fundraising platform in partnership with UNICEF, supporting the water sanitation and hygiene program for children in the Pacific. We're joined now by sports reporter Felicity Reid from Eden Park. Felicity, how are conditions for this world first kickathon?
Kia ora, Lisa. We're just over an hour away until Dan Carter will line up his first of many kicks behind me here on the 22-metre line. Sun's just gone down behind the stands. It's turning into quite a nice autumn evening. Had a little bit of a look earlier and it will be around 15 degrees overnight. No rain, some light winds, so really perfect conditions for doing all of that kicking.
Yeah, it actually looks quite beautiful there with the golden hour with the sun. So this target of 1,598 goals, it seems very specific, Felicity.
Yes, it is, and that was on purpose. 1,598 is the number of points that Dan achieved in his 112 tests for the All Blacks. So that's why that was chosen. And I think we'll remember most of those kicks were taken with his left boot. But if you think about it, this is 24 hours, 1,598 kicks. That's nearly a kick a minute if you're landing them all. He's had a kicking accuracy percentage of the late 70s across his career. So he's going to be pushing it at some points, but if he wants to, he can switch to his right foot, because we all remember that 2015 World Cup final where he kicks over Bowden Barrett's conversion with his right foot, so he is capable of switching should he need to.
And if I were to wake up in the middle of the night, Felicity, and think, goodness me, how's Dan Carter doing? Would I be able to see what's going on?
Absolutely. There's no cheating, there's no hiding. Even in the dark of night, you can watch the live stream of him. It's on his website, and that's also the place when you can donate.
Thank you, Felicity. That is Felicity Reid there at Eden Park, and the clock is ticking down to the beginning of that, kickathon. The Australia Prime Minister hasn't yet called the election, but has been blasted by a pensioner at an unofficial election campaign visit to a pub. The pensioner was angry over the cost of living pressures and broken promises. The ABC's Jess Davis reports.
Kissing babies and meeting with people at the pub are common on a campaign trail, but mingling with voters can be tricky for politicians.
Listen here, mate, this is the only way you can talk to me.
Last night, Prime Minister Scott Morrison learnt that the hard way.
This is what you said when you got elected last time. We're going to help all those people that worked all their lives, paid their taxes, and those that have a go will get a go. Well, I've had a go, mate. I've worked all my life.
At the Edgeworth Tavern on the outskirts of Newcastle, the Prime Minister received a bollocking from a patron. The disability pensioner clearly angry, not afraid to say so.
You can have $1 million house. You can have 250,000. Like, listen to me for a change, right? 250,000 in the bank. You can have negative gearing, franking credits, but a disability pensioner can't have any income.
The man told the Prime Minister he'd worked in the mines for 30 years, but was now struggling to survive. He also had some other demands.
You know another promise that you made?
Okay, well, look, we've had quite a chat.
You got to have an integrity commission.
Before he was ushered away with the offer to talk to one of the Prime Minister's staff.
Hey, you better fucking do something. I don't care. I'm sick of your bullshit.
It's not just the public confronting Scott Morrison. The internal fractures in the Liberal Party don't seem to be going away. Michael Toke, the man Scott Morrison eventually defeated in 2007 to become the Liberal candidate for the Sydney seat of Cook, is adding to those political headaches.
Scott Morrison doesn't have much credibility now when it comes to the truth. I mean, he's been called out by his own side. Malcolm Turnbull, Tony Abbott, the French president, Barnaby Joyce, called him not only a liar, but a compulsive liar.
After claiming Mr Morrison had used a campaign of racial vilification against him, Michael Toke has now told Network 10's The Project that he's been contacted by a federal cabinet minister.
I've got text messages from a cabinet minister telling me, I believe you, and do what you need to do, just be careful.
He didn't reveal the minister's identity, and the ABC hasn't seen the text exchange. The Prime Minister has repeatedly denied the allegations about his conduct, calling them malicious and bitter slurs which are deeply offensive.
And to some of your feedback on the fizzy drinks, absolutely yes to water and milk only at school, says Liz. Leadership in our country's obesity must start with children. Another person says is chocolate milk and strawberry milk considered to be safe for the rugrats. I don't know about safe, but they wouldn't pass the test for this ban. Milk only, water and milk substitutes.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Good afternoon. I'm Karen McCarthy. Matariki will be recognised as a public holiday for the first time this year. Legislation establishing the new holiday has passed its third and final reading at Parliament. National and ACT opposed the bill, while Labour, the Greens and Te Pāti Maori supported it. The first Matariki public holiday will be on June the 24th this year, but the day will shift each year according to when the star cluster rises. Deputy Prime Minister Grant Robertson says it's not just another public holiday.
This is a celebration of Aotearoa New Zealand. This is a recognition of tikanga Māori, of the Te Ao Māori view of the world, and a celebration of who we can be as a nation.
The Matariki public holiday will always fall on a Monday or Friday. An 11-year-old getaway driver with 8 passengers fled for 20 kilometres down Auckland's southern motorway before road spikes brought them to a halt. The group is accused of ram-raiding a dairy in the Auckland suburb of Sandringham early this morning and fleeing with stolen goods. They switched cars in Kingsland and took off down the motorway before police stopped them at Clendon. 2 are due to appear in the youth court and the others have been referred to youth aid. The owner of the dairy says about $300 worth of cigarettes were stolen and an empty till. The ACT Party says the Cancer Society has been hijacked by political activism and should stick to advocating for patients rather than engaging in stunts. The Society, along with more than a dozen other NGOs, has penned an open letter expressing support for a Maori health authority. It asks the National and ACT parties to reconsider their opposition to the government's plan. ACT's deputy, Brooke Van Velden, says it's sad the Cancer Society put out a public statement instead of arranging a sit-down meeting.
In future, we should all hope that the Cancer Society will focus on cancer rather than treaty politics.
The National Party says it does not believe a separate Maori health authority will improve outcomes for cancer patients. The National Party is scoffing at a government proposal to ban primary schools from providing fizzy or sugary drinks. Schools would only be able to offer pupils water, milk or non-dairy milk alternatives. National's Deputy Leader Nicola Willis says the Education Minister should be focusing on more important matters.
Do we want to see a system where there's rigid controls and rules from Wellington which will stop my kid having a Fanta at the school disco? I don't think so.
The Education Ministry is now seeking public feedback on the idea. Rest homes are being advised to still check visitors for vaccine passes, even though it's no longer compulsory. Some rest homes no longer require evidence of vaccination, but use rapid antigen tests and other measures to keep residents safe. But the Chief Executive of the Aged Care Association, Simon Wallace, says the passes are one of several lines of defence to protect vulnerable residents against COVID-19.
For aged residential care, so all the rest homes in New Zealand, the Aged Care Association's advice to all its members is that they continue to cite a vaccine pass prior to entry into a rest home.
Vaccine mandates are still in force for aged care workers. Another top health boss is resigning, the fifth in the last 3 days. Today it's the Mid-Central Health Board Chief Executive, Catherine Cook, who's been in the role for 7 years. Ms Cook is stepping down at the end of June to spend more time with her family. 3 senior Ministry of Health staff announced their resignations yesterday, including the Director General, Ashley Bloomfield. The Chief Executive of the Southern DHB, Chris Fleming, announced on Tuesday he was leaving. It's 6:04. Major Russian banks and members of the country's elite were the main targets of the latest US and British sanctions. Sberbank, Russia's largest, will have its assets frozen in the US and the UK. President Putin's 2 adult daughters are among Russian individuals newly targeted by Washington. Here's the BBC's David Willis.
President Biden was very emotional today as he talked about the latest atrocities committed by Russians in Ukraine. He said they amounted to nothing less than war crimes. Hence these new sanctions, which are being directly linked to those latest reports over the weekend from Ukraine. They include a ban on Russia's 2 biggest banks, on dealings by Vladimir Putin's 2 daughters, and also targeting the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov's wife and daughter.
The road between Te Puia Springs and Tokomaru Bay in Tairāwhiti will finally reopen tomorrow after severe weather hit the region 2 weeks ago. The section of State Highway 35 suffered significant damage. It will only open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and close overnight for at least 2 weeks. But Waka Kotahi says work is far from done and there could be delays in some areas. The bridge at Tokomaru Bay reopened last weekend. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Eric Brenson looks back on a record-breaking month or two of global weather. This week's overseas correspondent Mohammed Ali Harisi discusses the other war, the one in Yemen. And NEMA marine geologist Kevin Mackay speaks to us on the eve of his departure for the coast and seabed around the Hunga Tonga Hunga Ha'apai volcano, or at least what's left of it, on Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Back to Checkpoint with Lisa Owen after the short forecast from Met Service to midnight on Friday. For Northland, Auckland, Coromandel and Bay of Plenty, fine, apart from isolated showers in Northland. Waikato to Kapiti, including the Central High Country, fine today, cloud and a few showers spreading north tomorrow. Gisborne to Wairarapa, also Wellington, a few showers clearing this evening or overnight, fine tomorrow, but the chance of a shower in Wellington and Wairarapa. Bulla and Westland, fine today. A few showers developing overnight, clearing to fine in Westland tomorrow afternoon. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, mainly fine. A few showers developing about North Canterbury and the Kaikoura district tomorrow evening. Otago, Southland and Fiordland. Occasional showers about the coast, fine inland and in northern Fiordland. Showers becoming widespread for a time tomorrow morning. And the Chatham Islands, occasional showers, clearing for a time tomorrow morning. It's coming up to 6:07.
Kia ora rā e hoa no mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Both National and ACT have dismissed an open letter from the Cancer Society urging them to rethink their opposition to the Maori Health Authority. The Cancer Society, along with more than a dozen other NGOs, have penned an open letter expressing its support for the dedicated agency. It says it asks the opposition parties to reconsider their position, but the move has only hardened their resolves. Our political reporter Annika Smith has more.
Both National and ACT have come out swinging against the Maori Health Authority, promising to scrap it if elected to power. Cancer Society's co-medical director, Dr. George Laking, has been listening to the debate and says it was this promise that prompted him to wade in.
We are urging the opposition to rethink their position on this. And to not plan to scrap the Maori Health Authority. We view the Maori Health Authority as a very positive development in Maori health.
The open letter backs the establishment of the Maori Health Authority, saying it will help ensure everyone has the same access to good health outcomes. Dr. George Laking says support has been building over the past 24 hours and it's now been signed by more than a dozen NGOs, including the Lung, Stroke and Gynecological Health Foundations.
Everyone agrees this is a very major problem. It's logical to put the commissioning power and the expertise in the hands of the people who understand it from up close the best.
The letter specifically requests both National and ACT rethink their approach to the Maori Health Authority. But National won't budge. Its leader, Christopher Luxon, says a Maori Health Authority is more mindless bureaucracy.
There's not a single improvement in cancer outcomes for Māori with the creation of a Maori Health Authority. The government's saying there will not be a single improvement in health outcomes for Māori for 5 years.
The ACT Party has gone a step further, both digging its heels in and accusing the Cancer Society of being hijacked by political activism.
I think people who donate to the Cancer Society would expect that the Cancer Society should work with all politicians from all sides.
ACT's Deputy Leader, Brooke Van Velden, says the Cancer Society could have picked up the phone.
It's sad that they've come out with a public statement when they could have easily just asked to sit down with us and hear our opinion.
But the Cancer Society has heard ACT's opinion and disagrees. Dr. George Laking says establishing a Maori Health Authority is about better health outcomes for Māori, not politics, drawing on an aeroplane analogy to make his point.
It's desirable to entrust the flying of the plane to the pilots who understand what's at stake with the business. Thank you very much.
The Maori Health Authority is still being established. The wider health reforms expected to take effect from the 1st of July.
Right, earlier in the program, Dunedin pharmacist Peter Barron talked me through doing a rat test, the way he says you should do it. And remember, this is a pharmacist who is supervising tests. Mixed response here. Someone says, "Hi, I'm currently sick with COVID. I was feeling unwell for a few days, but had a number of negative tests. Then I did what Susie Wiles suggested and swabbed my throat, gagged, and then did my nose. Positive result straight away," they say, followed by 3 exclamation marks. Another listener says, "Please, you did that rat test completely wrong." Also, good use of exclamation marks following that one too. And I suppose that's the whole point. There is debate over how to do it, and different professionals are telling you to do it different ways. Now, this person says the rat test instructions do not include where and how to report the results. It's a mission to find that out. My guess is that if such information was supplied with the test kits, reporting would go up. If you just want to get away from it all, we could have the job for you. Posty at the end of the earth. The address, the British base, Port Lockroy, Goudia Island, Antarctic Peninsula. The UK Antarctic Heritage Trust is searching for a small team of people for the November to March season. Duties include processing postcards, counting penguins and showing people around the museum. Tourist expeditions are expected to return this season following a COVID break. I mean, how busy could it be? Lauren Luscombe from the Trust explains what it takes to be an ice postie on an island that is no bigger than a football pitch.
It is a busy role. I mean, we do send around sort of 80,000 postcards around the entire world. And we train people. So we
hang on a minute. Lauren, say that number again. How many postcards?
80,000. I think that's the average.
In a year?
A lot.
Or
yeah. So that's in a season. So our season's up to about 5 months. So normally through sort of November through to March, there'll be about 80,000 postcards going out.
So they're going out from Antarctica to the rest of the world, are they? Or the other way around?
Yes. No, from Antarctica to the rest of the world.
Right.
Crazy.
So the postie's going to be run off their feet?
It's a busy job. The cancelling, obviously, of the postcards. Has to kind of be on the ball and just keep going. So, I mean, a lot of the postcards are sent out. So the visitors that we get about, pre-pandemic, we were getting around 18,000 visitors to the site each year. And then they'd come in and, everyone would obviously want to send a postcard to family and friends. So it was never just the one. You end up with sort of 6 or 7 handful of postcards. And then, they just get out. The route they go is via the Falklands. So the team arrange for postcards to be sent to the Falklands. And then from the Falklands, they go back into the postal system. And then from there, they're dispersed all over the world.
What about incoming post? Is there much of that?
So they do get some. It takes a while. So definitely they get some. So again, it goes via the Falkland Islands. And then it depends on sort of ships that are going via the Falkland Islands and then going further south. They'll be delivering the mail, so to speak. The island's about the size of a football pitch. So they'll literally drop down to the landing site. The post will be brought over on a Zodiac and they'll pick the mailbag up. They'll bring it into the base and they'll, see what's in the post, and then they'll send out the outgoing post same way. So they'll load it onto the Zodiac onto a ship. Ship then goes probably via a lot of other landing sites, eventually to the Falkland Islands, and then from there on a flight and then back into the UK Postal Service. And then, the most amazing thing is just, it's £2 to send a postcard, anywhere in the world. So
£2?
It's a bargain.
So about £4 New Zealand bucks to send it anywhere you like in the world. Okay, so that's the post. I hear penguins are part of the gig as well. What's the role there?
Now there's a colony of gentoo penguins that live on the island with the team that will be there. So they're literally sort of pecking on the windows where they're sleeping and making a lot of noise, as you can imagine, for the team. So the base is sort of affectionately known as the Penguin Post Office. And
I understand there can be a poop issue there with the penguins?
Yeah. So there's a lot of guano. Penguin poop to deal with, and as you can imagine, the penguins eat a lot of the krill, so it's quite fishy in the smell. So there's quite an aroma when you first land on the island.
Now, I understand there is no running water where these people will be staying?
No, that's right. So there isn't any running water. So usually it's the visiting cruise ships that offer that. So usually the team will go on board the cruise ships and they'll have a shower there. Now, we've recently just had a team down there. They were actually only really doing maintenance and conservation work, so they weren't welcoming guests this past season. But obviously they weren't going on board those cruise ships, so they were going for periods of up to about 3 weeks without a shower. And I think on day one of them it's quite rocky terrain, and one of them sort of had a little, not a serious slip or fall or anything like that, but just sort of landed in a lot of the penguin guano, and they all had to go down and sort of rinse those outer clothes out in the sea. I think they eventually had a bit of a laugh about it, but I think it took a while to start laughing about that one.
You're really selling this to our listeners. three weeks in between showers if you're lucky. Fantastic. So I've got this clear in my head. Where the post office is, if you like, do you actually live in that same location?
Yes, you do. Yes, so Goudier Island, where the post office is based, it's actually a historic site and monument. So we operate, there's 3 buildings on the island. One of the buildings is the old base that was formed in 1944. So that is operated as a living museum. And then there is the gift shop in there and the post office. And as a charity, sort of all the proceeds from the gift shop go back into the charity and the conservation work that we do. And we actually manage 5 other historic sites and monuments along the Antarctic Peninsula. So the team live in one of those buildings, not the historical building. They actually live in a purpose-built accommodation. And it is fairly basic. As I said, there's no running water, but it's comfortable. You know, they've got a stove, they've got they've got a cooker, they eat well. Basic but well, and they're comfortable in there, and I mean it's a unique experience that really bonds them as well. In their downtime, obviously, there's lots of things they can do, but mostly they just enjoy sort of appreciating the surroundings, because sometimes they're so busy. I don't think they actually get to stop and just kind of appreciate where they are and just sort of pause and look out and watch the wildlife.
So just in summary, right, you're at the end of the universe, it's 0 degrees or less. There are no running water or showers, and you're surrounded by penguin poo. But it's really beautiful.
Yeah, exactly. And you'll be surprised how many applications we receive.
That was Lauren Luscombe. Now, if you're interested in the job, the deets are on the United Kingdom Antarctic Heritage Trust website. Applications close at 23:59 British Standard Time, 25th of April. And you have to have a current working visa. It pays about £1,800 a calendar month, so fill your boots. It is 18 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. 2 of Australia's top intelligence chiefs have travelled to Solomon Islands to raise Australia's deep concerns over a security agreement that the Pacific Island country is on the cusp of signing with China. They met with the Prime Minister, who last night posted a picture with the 2 men. The ABC's Foreign Affairs reporter, Stephen Jeditz, says the Australian government doesn't seem keen to release much detail about the meeting.
All we really have to go on here is a photo which was posted late last night by the office of Solomon Islands Prime Minister Manasseh Sogavare, and a statement issued by them as well. Now, this photo seems to indicate at least 6 people attended this meeting. Mr Sogavare, the Solomon Islands Foreign Minister and Police Minister, and 3 top Australian officials, at least. Paul Simon, who's head of the Overseas Spy Agency, the Australian Secret Intelligence Service, the Director General of the Office of National Intelligence, Andrew Sheeran, and Australia's High Commissioner to Solomon Islands, Lachlan Strawn. Now, in a statement, Mr Sogavare's office described Mr Sheeran and Mr Simon as special envoys for Australia's Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, who have clearly been sent to Honiara, and the purpose, of course, is very clear. They want to try and dissuade Solomon Islands from signing its deeply contentious and very broadly worded new security pact with China. Now, the reasons for this, of course, are well known. Australian officials fear that this agreement could lay the groundwork for a Chinese military presence in Solomon Islands in the future. Now, in the statement, Mr Sogavare says that the meeting provided a platform for the 2 countries to, quote, better understand each other, in particular on Solomon Islands' decision to broaden its security partnership with China and other countries. And it also says that Solomon Islands, quote, reassured Australia that its security concerns with this agreement are domestically focused, and complements the current agreement with Australia. So the tone here, at least, is quite conciliatory. if there has been any softening whatsoever in Solomon Islands' position or any sort of reconsideration, it's simply not apparent from the statement that Mr. Sogavare issued. In fact, in this statement, although Mr. Sogavare does talk about Australia remaining the partner of choice of Solomon Islands and talks of trust being cemented between the two states, there's no sense of a back down. In fact, I suspect that these words are basically an attempt to simply paper over the cracks which have emerged between Honiara and Canberra over the last 2 weeks over this agreement. And in the statement, Mr. Sogavare also seems to make it very clear Solomon Islands won't back down. It pointedly says that China remains an important trading partner for both countries, which seems like a bit of a veiled swipe at Australia, and also makes it pretty clear the government's not going to abandon its efforts to strike security pacts with more countries. So if this was, as it appears, a last-minute dash by the two spy chiefs aimed at stopping the agreement in its tracks, it doesn't appear to have been successful.
Evidence is continuing to mount of atrocities committed by Russian forces against Ukrainian citizens. Residents in the village of Berestyanka, near the capital Kyiv, have described rapes and shootings. The ABC's Sean Rubinstein Dunlop has more and a warning. Now, this report does contain graphic descriptions.
The tiny village of Berestyanka is littered with the remains of a vicious Russian occupation. The wreckage of armoured vehicles are strewn in the forest near trenches dug out along a dirt road. Rockets and ammunition supplies are scattered through fields and backyards, and houses have been ransacked, looted and some set on fire after Russian soldiers retreated days ago to regroup for a fresh assault on Ukraine's east. Local woman Vera returned here yesterday to find her home turned upside down, graffiti sprayed on the walls, furniture torn apart, and empty bottles of booze and condoms on the floor. The soldiers brought women here, she tells us, and they ate all our food supplies. What are we going to plant? What are we going to eat? This village northwest of the capital was a staging point for Russian forces as they tried for weeks to storm Kyiv. Pensioner Larissa Fedorets told us she hid in a cellar as soldiers terrorised residents. They treated us badly, she said. They were walking with their machine guns pointed at us, and late at night they were showing up drunk and shooting people in the legs. Locals here tell harrowing stories. 65-year-old Valentina Cherednichenko buried her son-in-law in a shallow grave in their backyard. She tells us he was senselessly executed by drunken soldiers last month who arrived at their front door looking for his wife and her friend.
They knocked heavily on the door. He came to open it. It was all dark. Come with us, he said. We are taking you to our headquarters. They came to take these two women to rape them. And he said he's not letting them. He said, I'm Russian. Are you going to shoot me? And then there was a click and Sasha fell. He was lying right there and I put a jacket under his head and his brains leaked out into my hands. Two young soldiers came and dug a hole. They could hardly drag him from the house. We couldn't go to the cemetery because there was shelling all around and the rockets were coming.
A woman told us she and another person were raped the same night by two Russian soldiers. Her rapist was just 19. The rapes and killings of civilians by armed forces amount to war crimes, and each day in Ukraine more cases emerge in the towns and suburbs surrounding Kyiv. Ukrainian authorities believe of all the areas around the capital, this one has suffered the most atrocities. The Ukrainian government says tales like these are just the tip of the iceberg, and Ukraine's citizens are suffering a genocide.
It is 25 minutes past 6. Singer Ed Sheeran has won his legal battle over claims he copied part of his song Shape of You from another artist. He had been accused of ripping off part of the track from a song by grime artist Sammy Chokri. The BBC's Mark Savage has more.
I'm in love with the shape of you. We push and pull like a magnet do.
This is Ed Sheeran's Shape of You.
I'm in love with your body.
And here's the song he was accused of stealing it from.
Where do I put myself through this?
In an unusual step, Ed Sheeran took the artist behind that song, Sammy Chokri, to the High Court to have his copyright claim dismissed. Today, he won and called it a victory for songwriters everywhere.
I feel like claims like this are way too common now and have become a culture where a claim is made with the idea that a settlement will be cheaper than taking it to court, even if there's no base for the claim. It's really damaging to the songwriting industry. There's only so many notes and very few chords used in pop music. Coincidence is bound to happen.
Club isn't the best place to find a lover, said the bar is where I go.
The court heard how Shape of You was written in under an hour in October 2016. Lawyers for Mr. Chokri said that speed proved Ed Sheeran had copied the melody. Sheeran's team said it just proved his genius. In his ruling, Judge Anthony Zaccaroli said that although there were similarities between the two songs, they were not big enough to constitute copyright infringement. He also accepted Ed Sheeran's testimony that he had never heard Sammy Chokri's song before he wrote Shape of You. Millions of pounds in royalties have been frozen since the case began. Today's decision means Ed Sheeran gets to keep his share of that money.
Scientists may have found direct evidence to prove the theory that dinosaurs were wiped out by a huge asteroid colliding with Earth 66 million years ago. A tiny fragment of the asteroid itself may have also been found at a secret site in North Dakota in the US. It's been nicknamed Tanis. The BBC's Rebecca Morrell has this report.
It was the most cataclysmic day in our planet's history. 66 million years ago, an asteroid 7 miles across slammed into the Earth. The age of the dinosaurs was over. Now, a mass graveyard unearthed in North Dakota could contain the first evidence of creatures killed on that day.
Oh, wow. Oh, my God. Look at that. Look, the scales are preserved.
In the crumbling rock, animals, plants and trees are tangled together, frozen in time like a prehistoric Pompeii.
We've got so many details with this site that tell us what happened moment by moment. It's almost like watching it play out in the movies. We're able to see what happened within that first hour or so after impact. And that's the front row seat to one of the most amazing events of the Cretaceous.
Despite all of the dinosaurs discovered and displayed in museums, they don't tell the full story. The dinosaurs here were found all around the world, and they span their entire 180 million year reign on the planet. It's widely accepted that this domination came to an end when the asteroid struck. But there's a mystery. No one's ever found direct evidence of a dinosaur killed by the impact, or even a fossil dinosaur that died within 1,000 years of it. Now, though, a discovery at Tanis may have changed that.
There's something here. That's hard.
More bone.
That's bone right next to the skin.
This is the moment a dinosaur's leg was discovered, captured by a BBC documentary crew. The fossil belongs to a small plant-eating dinosaur called a thessalosaur. The team thinks it died in a huge flash flood set off by shockwaves from the asteroid strike.
This looks like an animal whose leg has simply been ripped off really quickly. There's no evidence on the leg of disease, there are no obvious pathologies, there's no trace of the leg being scavenged. This could be the first bit of dinosaur ever found that died as a direct result of being involved in the cataclysm that occurred after the meteorite hit.
That is pretty much all we've got time for. Don't forget the late news team's going to keep you updated throughout the night. Ko te kaupapa tuatahi a pōpō. And tomorrow from 5 a.m, former Defence Minister Ron Mark tells First Up it's time New Zealand provided lethal aid to the Ukraine. Kaua e wariwari te atatero I a mātou kōrero. Don't forget to check out all our videos online, especially that one about Burma the elephant. This in from a listener. Will she fly on a jumbo jet? But
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The Deputy Prime Minister says Matariki is a celebration of New Zealand as it becomes a public holiday for the first time in June. The police used road spikes to bring a vehicle driven by an 11-year-old to a halt following a ram raid at an Auckland dairy. The anti-mandate protesters camping at Dunedin's Octagon have until Monday to leave. And several areas of Sydney are being evacuated after the city received more than a month's worth of rain in a day. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
What do we import from Russia?
Oil, it has been fertilizer or machinery, and it's been vodka and beer, believe it or not.
People might be having dreams around things like nuclear warfare, again being